Hey guys, it's Greg here at the Vinyl Rundown, and we are very fortunate to have a very special guest with us. Here in Los Angeles is renowned saxophone player, woodwind player, composer, musician, Vinny Golia. And Vinny, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And you're in your home studio, which is located where?
I'm in Newhall.
Newhall. Okay, not too far from us. I'm in Woodland Hills, but you're up near CalArts, it sounds like, where you spend a lot of time.
Yeah, I teach there, so it was smart to buy a house near here.
But let's give our some of our listeners just a little background on Vinny. He's been making records since, I think, 1977. Taking a quick look at his online stuff, it looks like you have something like over 150 or 160 releases under your name, plus dozens of side projects, mostly in the genre of jazz, or what we would call avant-garde or free jazz. But I've learned only recently that he's also a very prolific composer, and that's not necessarily the jazz idiom. Vinny, do you want to tell us just a little background information about the early part of your career? Oh, another thing I wanted to mention. Mr. Golia and I have had a couple of weird crossings of our paths. Last week I pulled up this record, and this is Black is the Color by Joe Henderson. I got this at a library sale for $1, which is amazing, but Vinny's name is on the back as having done the artwork. So that's kind of a segue into your early career as a visual artist before you got so much into music. Can you tell us about that beginning and that transition?
That particular record, I think I was helping someone move, and they knew Joe, and they were doing a session with them. And I was really scuffling around for money at that time. And they said, why don't you call Joe and see about perhaps you could draw some pictures and he might use it for the cover. So I went to the session, and then the first thing that happened was they told me, of course you can't sit in the room. And I said, am I going to see anything? And the bassist, Dave Holland, said, he's very quiet. He's been at sessions I've done before. And they said, okay, first sound we hear, you're out. And I said, that's fine, you know. So they were, it was a really nice session. I remember George Cables and Ron Carter and Dave Holland both played bass on some of the cuts, but on the freer, smaller ensemble, just Dave played. Jack DeJohnette on drums, and they were going to overdub some more of Joe later, and on there to get like a, you know, it's kind of a.
So were you doing art? Session. Were you doing art while they were playing, or were you just using that for inspiration?
Yes, yeah, I was drawing as they played.
Got it. Interesting.
And the next step was to talk to Aaron Keepnews. And the first thing when I walked in his office with my drawings, or like, you know, I don't have to buy any of these things. You know that, right? And I said, yeah, I know. I said, I was just there. Joe let me draw pictures, and that, you know, it was great to be there. And so he looked at a couple and he said, this will fit the concept of the album. He said, so I'm going to buy 2. So I made a couple $100, and that was good. It kind of set me on my way and stuff. But when I was living in New York, I didn't play. I was a painter and had a lot of shows and would have music at the shows. But I became friends with a lot of musicians, and one of them was Chick Corea. And I did an album cover for him called The Song of Singing. And with that money, I bought my first saxophone.
So you weren't even a trained sax player at that just prior to that? I mean, were you starting sax later in life?
I was 25 when I got into music. I just taught myself. I bought a book. how to play the saxophone.
Wow.
Yeah, Larry Teal. It's a great book, The Art of Saxophone, but I still have it. And then when I started playing clarinet, I bought The Art of Clarinet Playing, and when I played flute, I bought The Art of Flute Playing. They were really great books.
Wow. Self-taught without a teacher, cracking the whip and making you practice every week. That's amazing.
Well, I was around musicians that were quite good, and all became very famous in their own right, eventually. And my circle of friends were mostly musicians. I worked at the Museum of Modern Art during that time. This is like 1960s, late 60s, 67, 68. I was back there and living upstate New York in West Saugerties, but I was working on a cartoon as an animator and making some money, But I needed more. I needed more. And
ironically, you're back at CalArts, which was Disney's animation school before it became a fine art music. And interesting. Did your music career send you to LA at some point? You've been in Los Angeles for the majority of. Or am I wrong?
I was in. I did my first gig 1 year after I got a saxophone. I played in a band called Cosmology, and we played in. My first gig was in Charlottesville, Virginia, in 1971 or 72, something like that.
Was that jazz or?
It was a
jazz?
mixture of Indian music, Indian styled music, and folk music and jazz.
Okay.
And I play flute and take some solos on soprano, and play auto harp. We had auto harp tuned. I played percussion.
Did they record anything? Did they ever release any records? Cosmology?
It was a record made in New York. I don't know if it ever came out. That's when the band broke up, because of course you're going to have a guy playing saxophone 1 year, or you're going to have your choice of anybody in New York who are all, brilliant, mostly brilliant saxophones. I mean, I remember walking down the street with Dave Liebman one time, and I was saying, this is when I was a painter, I said, Dave, I said, it's surprising why you aren't more well known. We were passing these cabs. And he said, Vincent, he always called me Vincent. He said, Vincent, you see these cabs? I said, yeah. He said that every third cab has a saxophone player driving who's better than I am. And I said, well, okay, if that's what you think.
Well, that's how I feel about me being a guitar player in Los Angeles. It's like you can walk down the street in any Starbucks and find 10 better guitar players. So.
Yeah, it's funny that way.
I got away from it. I'm a listener and a collector and a connoisseur of all that, but I don't need to try to make a living from it.
I was. It's a rough road to do it, but it was really. I got to meet a lot of really amazing people and musicians and play with them, and through the years, and I've been very fortunate. People seem to gravitate to the way I play, and I've been very fortunate.
Going through the list of collaborators, just a few that sparked my interest here. Anthony Braxton, who's still around. He played in LA a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Tim Byrne, and maybe that is the origin story of how you and I ended up meeting. And Tim Byrne was one of the first big people that I interviewed on my channel. Alex and Nels Klein, I think I may have seen you with. William Parker. So I might as well give people our origin story, which was I did this series of interviews for Sonny Rollins' 90th birthday, including Tim Byrne. I think I may have said something in that interview that annoyed you a little bit about that LA doesn't have that great of a jazz club scene. Well, compared to New York, I think we would agree. But then you were commenting, I'm like, that's the great Vinny Golia commenting. I gotta reach out and see if he'll A, forgive me for the comment, and B, come do an interview. So you've collaborated with Tim over the years.
I was on his first two records, and just recently last year he played on. I did concert of large ensemble music at Roulette in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I hired him to play on that, and it sounded great as usual, you know. Yeah, we play not often, but we still play together. The first two records, Tim would come out to the West Coast. He was very good friends with Alex, and that's how I met Julius Hemphill, and how Alex got the gig, because Tim recommended him, you know, to Julius.
Julius Hemphill, that's sort of Tim's mentor.
Yes. Yeah.
He talks about him a lot and was very
he's
influenced by him.
Great player and he was a great player and a great composer. I enjoyed the composing quite a bit. He had a different take on how to write, and if he would have hung around a bit, he was brilliant.
Unfortunately, a lot of the people I hang out with probably don't know his music very well. He died kind of early, and he's not enjoying this renaissance that the Blue Note people were having their stuff re-released over and over. So far, I haven't seen a lot of re-releases of his music.
No, I don't think he will either. There's one World Saxophone Quartet record where he wrote all the charts, and that one, it's just gorgeous. Actually, one of his side guys, Bikita Carroll, played on my second record, and that was 1978. Bikita saw the music. He said, more saxophone music for trumpet. and I said, does Julius do that to you? He said, man, Julius's tunes, he said, you'd be like playing the melody part, but all of a sudden you're playing the harmony, and then you're back playing the melody. They really intertwine and do these really nice moves and stuff. They're really hard to play. Nice music, really nice music.
And that takes me to two tangents. I wanted to talk about your composing and also your record labels, or record label. Maybe we start with the record label. As I think I mentioned in the beginning, you have something like 150 records, but at least a good chunk of that was on your own label. And what is that label called, and what's the story on that?
The label's called Nine Winds Records. I had been working and playing and was about to put out my first record, and every time I got to a certain point, then everything would fall apart. And eventually I just decided I looked around, and, you know, Los Angeles, we had at that time Bobby Bradford, John Carter, Horace Tapscott, James Newton, and I kind of played with Bob quite a bit, and during this period of time, sometimes David Murray, sometimes a few other, all these people were putting out their own records because no label was really interested in the West Coast musicians that well, you know. And I just decided to put it out myself. So I put the first one out. It was rather successful, sold out, had to reprint. That was pretty good in those times. Made a second record that did pretty good, you know.
How many copies is a sellout for a small independent jazz label?
At that time, we made 1,000 each run, so that was 1,000. And I made another reprint of 500, and I sold those. And I made another. Yeah,
are we in the 70s or 80s at this point?
1977, the first record came out. The end of it, 1977, the real end. I mean, it came out in December. The worst time in the world for a record to come out. When I was doing distribution, you know, we had the record business was a little different at that time. You know, there were one-stops and all these different places where you could sell whatever you needed to sell, and there were actual record stores, you know. And Tower came in and kind of ruined that system a bit. They started overbuying, and then they'd return records, and small labels couldn't really handle the return situation. You know, if you bought 10, usually a store would sell 10. They'd order maybe one more to keep in the bins and stuff like that. But Tower would order, because they had so many stores, they'd order 1,000. So you'd have to make an extra 1,000 for Tower, but they might return 750 of those. You know, so
economics of that is terrible for the small label. But I worked in 3 different record stores when I was in college, and I didn't work at Tower. I worked at Licorice Pizza, and that's why.
Oh yeah.
My wife and I have a massive collection here. This has been going on for
Well, I worked at Rhino.
several decades. Rhino.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, right in Westwood.
In Westwood.
Yeah.
Well, that's Nels Klein worked there too.
Yes, we worked together. Yeah, he got me the job, I think.
Oh my goodness. Well,
yeah.
I would have been shopping there. Let's see, I was at UCLA in '83, and then I was working at a media company right there in the early '90s. I think by the mid '90s, you guys were gone.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the many classic LA record stores that's gone
forever.
Oh
man, yeah. Puba's, you know, what was the one on
Aaron's?
Yeah, Aaron's and Puba and Rhino. That was it. You know, you could find anything there.
You still have vinyl records,
yes.
I assume. Good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a topic for another show. Maybe if you your house is already full of great instruments.
It is
saxophones.
overly full.
as is ours. Well, okay, that was part one of my two tangents, the record label. So is that still in operation? Is there still stuff in release in print, I should say?
We became pretty successful doing recordings of other people who played music, and my thing was only people from the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So we had music from as far north as British Columbia and into Mexico in the south. So we covered a large territory of stuff, but after a while, you know, the system just first off, I was playing, I was doing stuff. Sometimes I had a day job. It just got to be too much, and so I pulled it back to just put my own releases out, which is what I'm doing now. You know, kind of like Tim.
But that catalog of music sitting there waiting for you or somebody to revise it.
I pay $500. I pay $500 in storage a month for that for that stuff. It's there if anybody wants any.
You mean some records or just master tapes?
I have some records, not a lot of vinyl left. But I have all the masters, of course. But the way Nine Winds was run when I started slowing down, I gave the masters back to most people,
mm-hmm.
so that they could do what they want to do. You know,
right?
Perhaps stream it or whatever they wanted. You know.
Well, I don't know how closely you're following the vinyl record renaissance that we're having here, but the jazz records that are being dug out of the archives from 40, 50 years ago, and there are people going crazy with that right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that, but Blue Note really jumped on that, and now smaller labels are doing that too.
Well, you know what it was like back in the heyday. You know, you had Japanese pressings, you had virgin vinyl pressings, you had all
mm-hmm.
this stuff happening. I liked the nostalgia of the record, and I liked the record as an art object, because you can put artwork on the cover. Actually, that became a big outlet for me and another fellow, putting artwork on the covers and doing the covers and having some success with that. But did
you do a lot of the covers for your own label?
I did a lot of the CD covers. Yeah.
CDs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of the people who did the actual records, the first 28 batch of that, they had artwork that they usually wanted to put on the front. Like Kim Richmond, for example, his wife is a painter, and so all his projects always had his wife's paintings on the front. I had a couple of my paintings on the front of mine, and one or two of mine, some drawings also, things like that.
I'm gonna have to dig up some of this stuff if I can even find it on the internet. I see Nine Winds has a Wikipedia page, and there looks like 50 or 60 artists, maybe a third of which I'm familiar with.
It got very expensive, doing all the promotion. I didn't charge anything for that or any of that kind of stuff. But
what about this? What about this guy? This is the only solo record I have of yours. A couple of weeks ago, I found this at a record store in the Valley here, and I don't see your albums. I mean, if they were only being produced in 1,000 at a time, this is one that's not that hard to find compared to most of your catalog. So, yes, that's a younger Vinny Golia with some beautiful horn. Any comments on this record? So this is on Nine Winds. I just noticed. Was this remarkable or special record in any way besides the fact that I found one?
Well, during that particular period of time, I think that was done in the 80s. The economics of touring with a band became very difficult, and a lot of the horn players had to learn how to play solo and really mine the instruments for what they could do. And it created a change in like a lot of how the music was played. It created much more interest in chamber type music. And that particular record, I had done some solo concerts, like maybe one or two, maybe three or four. And then more people were asking me to play solo. Like I went to Washington State, the state of, and played solo there. Canada, it was easy to travel with the horns at that time. And I could bring a lot of horns, and I started playing these solo concerts. Eventually, I pared it down to like either clarinet or soprano saxophone or something like that. But this was really like it was really a big thing to change. So doing these concerts, it's always nice to have a document or something that you could sell on that. So somebody said, like, you should do the solo record. So I gritted my teeth and did solo record. I don't have many solo records. So I have maybe 2 recordings solo and 1 cassette recording somebody did put out on their label. And then just about a few years ago, I'd say maybe 8 years ago, 5 years ago, I did a solo record that's on Bandcamp with overdub woodwinds and some percussion. And then I did a solo gong and singing bowl record. As you can see, like I have an affinity for gongs, so I did that, and that record it was pretty interesting. A lot of people from the film world seem to take things from it and put it in their films.
Really, with your permission and remuneration.
Of course.
I hope. If there's anything if there's anyone you can trust more than a record producer, it's a film producer.
Yeah.
Here in Hollywood. Well, maybe that's a transition to the next topic, which is I only sort of recently learned that you're a composer outside of what we would call jazz ensembles and, for lack of a better word, new classical music, new orchestral music, and that seems to be an emphasis on the new record or records that you have coming out. So did you make a transition to I'm a composer now, or was it,
no,
how did that happen that you started composing for lots of instruments, ensembles, etc.?
One of my first gigs was playing with Anthony Braxton. This was 78 or so, I think. I played in his large group, his creative orchestra music. And then I got to play in a number of other things. I played in William Parker's Little Huey Band and such. And I have a big affinity for chamber orchestras. I really like chamber orchestra. I like the music that's written for it. And it doesn't matter like what period of time. I just like the concept of that. And then I started to get into larger pieces. And Alex Kleiner and I are both big fans of Messiaen. And so, we would listen to their music all the time, all different kinds of new composers. And the fact of being at CalArts, people would ask me to write them pieces for their recitals and things like that. So I started writing more and more and more and more. And I had started a large ensemble in 1982, and we played a lot around town all the way up until the band got out of the comfort size zone, which is about, around 28 people, you're starting to push it. But I was working in these larger groups around 50 or so. Matter of fact, this year I did a concert in the Bay Area with 77 musicians. So
is that number 77 significant? Because I know you did something around the number 70 a few years ago.
Yeah, that was my birthday. So they one of the
70 musicians.
77 musicians, 70 in the first one, and then 7 years later, I did another one. So I'm pushing towards 80. So
On your
when
80th,
I get to 80, I'll have one with 80.
And will that be 80? Will that be 80 minutes or 80 hours?
I don't know.
We'll figure that out. I assume your ensembles were mostly woodwinds or different winds and percussion, but you have strings too. You have everything, I guess.
I have some of the music on Bandcamp. The live at Red Cat string section is rather large. I think we had about 8 first violins, a couple of second violins, not too many, 5 or 4 violas, and about 6 cellos and two basses.
Full string section in some.
Yeah. I like writing, and I've been a couple of their projects you'll see on Bandcamp. One is for piano, percussion, strings, and woodwinds. So I have affinity for strings, and the newer stuff is a full orchestra. So it's over 100.
You mentioned Red Cat. I think I saw you play at Red Cat with both Klein brothers. This is like 7 or 8 years ago when Red Cat was just a year or two old.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a tribute for Henry Grimes. We played with Henry Grimes. That's what I think that might have been.
And
or it could have been Alex's concert where Nels played on his brother's concert. And
I just remember the 3 of you. There were probably other names that I don't. For those who don't know, Red Cat is kind of the basement of the beautiful Disney concert hall, where they have smaller ensemble groups and more sort of interesting, let's say, experimental stuff than they might have in the main hall. You mentioned Bandcamp, and your newest releases are on Bandcamp. I do want to talk about the new pieces you're composing, but I was just reminded that Bandcamp has gone through a lot of changes lately. They were sold and sold again and laid off half their staff. Is that already affecting the artists and musicians? Give us your thoughts on Bandcamp changes.
Everyone's waiting for the shoe to drop. Yeah, we all are kind of, I don't know, we're just waiting. There's no other platform that's been as forthcoming with monetary recompense for musicians than Bandcamp. Everybody else takes an inordinate amount of money and gives the artists nothing. But Bandcamp has been somewhat fair compared to all the other platforms. And it would be a shame to see that platform disappear. I'm sure someone will come up with an alternative, but the thing is, like, we don't have time to wait.
Building something as an alternative from the ground up is an immense cost of both programming and promotion and getting people on board. And I wish, somebody more from the artistic community would have just bought Bandcamp, somebody who has the funds. Maybe you can call your buddy Herb Alpert there, who's got $1 billion laying around. When you email me, it says Herb Alpert's School of whatever at CalArts, and he's the biggest philanthropist in the jazz world, probably.
He's created a doctoral program at CalArts with his money. He's put his money where his mouth is, and I give him a lot of props for that. He's tried to help the education system in terms of presenting music. I've never met him. I don't know him, but I mean,
he doesn't pop in to play a few rounds in your studio classes.
I've not seen him.
Yeah, that's what I would have expected. But my sincere point was, it would be great if somebody who really cared about the artists came forward, like we had United Artists back 100 years ago when actors were getting screwed by the studios, and they took it upon themselves to create an artist-friendly platform. Bandcamp was that. We don't know what it is now because it's been bought by corporations.
Right.
The fact that they laid half the staff off indicates that maybe they're looking to squeeze some money out of it.
Yeah, it's not a good sign.
I don't know how much money you can squeeze out of avant-garde jazz artists. There's better places to squeeze money out of, probably.
Tim Tim was on the radio one time being interviewed in LA, and somebody said, "So you were a student and you met Julius?" And he said, "Yeah, I used to produce some concerts and things." And he said, "So what got you into playing the saxophone?" He said, "Oh, I thought it would be a great way to make a lot of money." And the guy said, "Really?" And Tim looked at him and said, "I was misinformed."
Now you tell me. Yeah. It is a labor of love. I mean, you've got the jazz world, and then you've got sort of this cutting edge, avant-garde, free jazz, whatever you want to call it. It's a small market inside a small market.
Well, the way it was shown to me is
the Venn diagram.
The big circle of like all music on the planet, and this little sliver of like 3% is what all of us are fighting about. Right. This little 3%, because everything else is owned by major corporations. But this little 3% is not. So that's like any new country music, any new classical music, any new jazz music, all that stuff is all in that 3%. And everybody doesn't know how, and no one knows how to, market it or do anything with it.
Well, jazz and classical typically are less than 1.5% to 2% each of new music sales. But the jazz and music fans are the biggest buyers. Per capita, there were times where I was buying 20, 30 records a month, which I'm not doing anymore. You can see I have no room. But the dedicated fan who becomes a completist, I have to have every Miles Davis record. Well, that's hundreds. You're 160 records.
Well, people like to have the beginning and the end. They like to see the progression. And if you're an artist of any ilk, you're constantly changing what you do. I mean, look at Tim. Look at Tim. He changes his concepts and his touring bands constantly and stuff like that. And it's kind of fresh. He comes up with new ideas. He's a very active musician. I like to do different things. I don't like to play the same thing. I don't just want to play trio or quintet or that. I like playing with the orchestra, but who's going to give me an orchestra? So I have to do it on recordings. That's our outlet for a lot of the work. It's like painting in many ways. We create a canvas or a performance space or something like that. People come see it. Everything is cool, and then that's done. You work on your next project, and that's how it is with creative people. And a lot of the people who are what we call fans, are people who follow in the arts and want to have a piece of that, and that's really wonderful for us. And it gives us the impetus and also sometimes the economic reality to go further into the music and come up with these things. I never would have had the idea to make orchestral pieces if people weren't interested in the large ensemble pieces. And no one, and people wouldn't have pursued the large ensemble stuff if they hadn't followed the quintets and all that stuff that I've been doing like that. And I feel very thankful for that, to have people so supportive. I mean, that's one of the things that makes us push forward and forward, that there are like all these people listening behind you, and it doesn't have to be a ton of people. It's just as long as they're into the music, Yeah,
artists have to find their audience and grow that audience, and
a
lot of people doing it well. Yeah, I have 3,000 people.
Well, you're presenting, people who are a bbit more obscure, and you're giving them a chance to vent their thing, and you're telling them about you played with this guy, you did this, you had this recording. Otherwise, people, sometimes people don't always do the research like that. So it's just wonderful.
Afterwards, you'll introduce me to a couple more people who might want to come and yak with me. But to that point, there's a bias. There's a group of a couple hundred of my buddies who make videos They've named themselves the vinyl community. We're the online vinyl community.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the channels that talks more about jazz, but not always. Sometimes classical, sometimes rock. But there's this bias towards the vinyl record, which was really a thing in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And now artists who's fantastic jazz artists whose career maybe span the CD era, they kind of get left out of this discussion. And that's just sort of a bias of the format. So that's one of my sort of criticisms is all this interest in a 25-year-old who's digging into Hank Mobley for the first time. That's amazing, but don't ignore the new people out there. Tim Byrne is young. He's young enough that he's one of the new people compared to Hank Mobley and Miles Davis. People that are long gone. Where was I going with that thought?
Well, Hank Mobley's an interesting example because he wound up being an elevator operator, at
the end of his life,
in Philadelphia.
I didn't know he was not successful or monetarily at the end of his life.
No, he wasn't. But part of that was because of his own
demons.
Yeah, yeah. So he may have wasted his talent a little bit. But really, if you think about jazz phrasing, Hank Mobley's the cat. Most of the other players, even Dexter Gordon, they have Dexter Gordon in particular has a more staccato kind of approach to the eighth note. Hank Mobley has this beautiful lilt when he plays.
Legato and
gorgeous.
Very sweet, soft phrasing. His records, you might not know this, but his records are probably the most expensive, sought-after original pressings because his career was a short period of time. He made great records. They didn't make very many. And now he's been discovered by such a huge audience that you could literally go on eBay and find several records of his going for $1,000-$2,000 as originals.
Wow.
Yeah. And now Blue Note, especially Blue Note and Don Was done a great job reissuing all that stuff. Now they're coming out as these audiophile versions that are, $40 each for one record, which kills me.
Yeah.
That Blue Note Tone Poet series, and they do like 2 classic records every month, and that the jazz vinyl world has really just gone crazy, and I don't want to keep up with it, but luckily there's a few producers and companies, labels out there that send me a couple of things once in a while.
Oh, that's nice.
And, that's a big time of year for record shopping because of Christmas coming up. So literally I think I got 7 or 8 discs in the last 2 weeks that I don't even have time to listen to.
I just bought the Mosaic set of Don Bias. It's supposed to come the end of November, but I bought the CD version because I travel and I like to drive, so I just keep pushing them into this. I still have a car with a CD player in it.
So do I. It barely works. Yeah, Mosaic stuff, highly regarded. I actually have, I think, 16 discs of Hank Mobley on Mosaic, but I got a super bargain on that. Let's transition to the mega project you've been working on for the last, I don't know how many years, but remind us of the name and everything we need to know of your release and composition thing.
Well, I have this project. We were talking about the birthday things. So it seems that my friend Rent Romas, who is a very fine saxophone player in the Bay Area, likes to do these projects. And so I was turning 75 and he wanted to have a concert with 75 musicians. And we had everything set up and the music was written, but COVID hit. So I had all this music and we were sitting at home. We couldn't go out. So I started to send some to different people. And I had them do their parts and play remotely. And the parts that I couldn't get fixed, I found ways to use samples, like really, really good orchestral samples. And I started forming these orchestral pieces where people would improvise inside them. And the first series, things got out of hand, and the first series was 10.5 hours of music. And I decided, like, well, we're stuck at home. I'm going to put it out. So I put it up on Bandcamp. And there was a good response to it and such. And so I made a limited edition box set. Came out to 10 CDs, 12 CDs.
I'm gonna show the Bandcamp. Let's see if I have the technology.
There you are.
This is Movement 1.
Yes.
Inoculations music. Oh, I get it. COVID. Yeah. Inoculation music. But the remarkable thing about this is it's only, we're still going, people. It's only 158 tracks long, right?
Yes.
And it comes out to be 10 hours or something like that.
Yes, 10.5 roughly. Yeah.
And that's movement 1 of what will be 4 movements?
3 movements.
3 movements. Okay.
Yeah. I have mercy.
Not a symphony form, but maybe a concerto.
Yeah. And then during this period of time, I was writing, and we started to go back to school, and things started to return to normal. I got asked by one of my students, a doctoral student, to write a suite for guitar for him, and I did that, and I kind of started thinking about, like, all the guitarists I knew and people who work in electronics, and people like Nels and people like that, and I decided to keep going, and so this particular I finished just recently the second movement. It took about 1.5 years. It's 11 plus hours of music, but it's only 110 compositions because now people are playing a little longer and doing these things and such. And
that one on the screen here.
Yes, yeah. So right now I'm in the middle of number 3.
Okay, and you'll have that up and ready to go.
Probably about 1 year or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this word syncretism, is that a word that I should know, or is that something you invented? What is that word?
I think I invented that word. Yes, I like doing that. And the For the Draw is from a Kurosawa movie. I believe it's called Sanjuro.
Kurosawa.
Yeah.
The Japanese filmmaker.
And there's a big duel at the end of this movie, and one of the things that happens is Toshiro Mifune, who's a great Japanese actor, is looking over his now deceased opponent and says, "You were the one who drew first." So I got this idea of the draw, like people kind of facing off with this, I don't know, imaginary foe, which actually,
it's not this kind of a draw. It's more of a opponents. Got it.
It became like a thing about like the things we have to battle, like boredom, depression. I mean, there's so much negativity happening at the moment that I thought, like, hopefully this would be like a more positive thing. And everybody jumped on this like they jumped on the other one. So I felt really pretty good about the exploration of electronica in this one.
Are you selling this on disc form, or it's just Bandcamp downloads?
No, yeah, I'm trying to gauge what's happening. We just got a wonderful review in the December issue of Downbeat.
Oh, that's great.
Very complimentary about the recording. So hopefully some more people will be interested, and we'll see what happens.
I think listeners can go to Bandcamp and listen to some, or if not all of it. I don't know how that works. I was able to listen to it. I think I got 3 hours into it in 1 or 2 sittings. But my commentary, I was surprised how orchestrated it is, and it goes back and forth between, okay, this is jazzy with improvisation, but there's a lot of orchestral stuff that is almost like film scoring. And a
Mhm.
lot of it, I was saying, they're going, oh, I'm imagining an awesome film in the background of this. So when I first heard that you'd done this, I thought, oh, he's going to just jam on solo saxophone for 10 hours. No, that's not at all. It's a lot of composition in here. Probably hundreds of pages of composition. Now, orchestras never sat down together. This is all recorded remotely.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but true. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to do it with you live. Any of the pieces, going back to the first 158 to any of these 110 to the new ones. Right now, I'm about I can say there's about 50 compositions right now at the moment that I'm working with.
I don't think the Musicians Union will let you do a 10-hour show.
Probably not.
But maybe the suite from the show.
Kind of, like
that would be great.
Compact thing. Yeah.
Pick your favorite.
That would be wonderful. But I don't really hear anybody knocking on the door to say, hey, Vinny, we really want you to take this 150-piece orchestra.
But the third movement is going to be just as on the same scale of 8-10 hours, probably.
Probably so. Yeah. I mean, the compositions are even more or a bit more orchestral. Actually, I think it's going to be quite good. I have some of the soloists lined up, which is pretty good. Larry Kuntz, really fantastic
keyboard, right?
No, guitar player.
Guitar. Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's playing on one or two of them, and it's going to be. I think it'll be quite nice.
I think we're getting near the end of this. It's just by coincidence coming up right about up to the hour. It's been a pleasure, Vinny Golia, and folks, I've given you his Bandcamp down below there, and vinnygolia.com also. And please do check out the music compositions on his Bandcamp, the 2, 8, 9, 10 hour compositions. Worth your time. Put it on and let it go. And I can't do it justice verbally, so just go listen to it.
Thank you.
Vinny, real pleasure. Thank you so much for letting us interrupt your busy day of composition.
It's great.
And we'll say goodbye.
Yeah.
We'll sign off.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.